Meeting number 74. It's Tuesday, March 26th, 2013. We are studying Mr. Shory's private member's bill, which is Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act honoring the Canadian Armed Forces. We have quite a few guests here this morning. We have from the Muslim Canadian Congress, we have two representatives, Salma Siddiqui.
Thank you.
Good morning to you. You're the president.
Yes, morning.
Yes. And Tahir Goria, who is the Secretary General.
Good morning. Thank
you. I'm going to mess up all the pronunciations, and you'll just have to, live with me, that's all. Good morning to both of you.
Thank you.
We have Professor Grazia Scoppio from Queens.
RMC, sir.
I didn't hear. The Royal Military College. There it is, right there. Canadian Defence Academy, the Royal Military College of Canada, Department of National Defence. And good morning to you, Professor.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Ahmadiyya Muslim Jama'at.
Butchering these, eh?
Was that close?
Ahmadiyya.
Oh, Ahmadiyya. Asif Khan, the National Secretary for Public Relations. Imtiaz Ahmad, the Missionary and Public Relations Director of the Ottawa region. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So each group will have up to 10 minutes to make a presentation. We will start with you, Mr. Khan.
Good morning. Honourable Chair, Members of Parliament, colleagues and special guests, I'm honoured to be with you today to discuss Private Member's Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act honouring the Canadian Armed Forces. My name is Asif Khan, as mentioned, and I'm the National Secretary of Public Relations for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jama'at. Today I will speak to the importance and validity of Bill C-425 from the perspective of an Ahmadi Muslim. I'm an Ahmadi Muslim who has lived his entire life as a proud Canadian and a devoted Muslim himself. First and foremost, I can tell you that Islam is categorical and explicit in teaching Muslims that loyalty to one's country of residence, the land that provides for a person's livelihood and fosters their hopes and dreams, is an important tenet of faith. The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself once stated, "Love for one's homeland is part of one's faith." And so it is on the precept of this guidance from the founder of Islam himself that Ahmadi Muslims have such deep regard for the country we live in. Further to this, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the current worldwide spiritual head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jama'at, has further elaborated on this noble precept by guiding Ahmadi Muslims all over the world with the following words. He says, and I quote, as citizens of any country, we Ahmadi Muslims will always show absolute love and loyalty to the state. Every Ahmadi Muslim has a desire for his chosen country to excel and should always endeavor towards this objective. And about Canada in particular, His Holiness echoed the sentiments of all Canadian Ahmadi Muslims during his recent tour of Canada this past summer, when he stated, "I say without hesitation that the water and earth of Canada certainly contains high moral values and loyalty." He also repeated a prayer from our fourth Caliph that, and I quote, "The whole world becomes like Canada, and Canada becomes the whole world." Despite the 200 countries that Ahmadis are now living in, serving and building communities wherever they go, the Canadian government is at the forefront in helping Ahmadis become a key part of the fabric that weaves this country together. Whether it's Prime Minister Harper attending the opening of our mosque in Calgary, the largest in Canada, or the government's decision to announce the Office of Religious Freedom at our headquarters in Vaughan, we have felt the embrace of our nation in our home, which is Canada. And this serves as a heartbreaking reminder and joy for us, because many Ahmadi Muslims have migrated to Canada, fleeing from bitter persecution in Pakistan. Ahmadis there are legislatively sanctioned with actual amendments to the Pakistan Constitution, declaring us non-Muslims and setting harsh penalties of imprisonment and even death merely for practicing our faith. So Canada has been a haven for Ahmadiyya Muslims, making our love for this country all the more stronger. This is why we are at the forefront in giving back to our country and serving our communities. We are one of the largest partners for the Canadian Blood Services. We raise over 100,000 pounds of food for the less fortunate here each year. We hold community cleanups across Canada. We hold hospital fundraisers and have earned the respect and appreciation of the leaders and public figures of every community we reside in. But our love for this country goes far beyond this, and it is this love that demands us Ahmadiyya Muslims to uphold the sanctity of Canadian citizenship to the utmost. Canadian citizenship is a great blessing and a gift whose importance and purity must be protected and preserved. That is why it is crucial that the Canadian government should possess the power to strip Canadian citizenship from all such dual citizens who are convicted and confirmed in committing acts of war against the Canadian Armed Forces. If our government does not possess this right, then how can we deter such would-be transgressors against the state from committing acts that threaten the security of this country? It is only just that those who undermine the value of their Canadian citizenship enough to wage war against the state should also thereby forfeit their right to that very citizenship. A citizenship that so many countless millions are in search of, yet so disregarded by such troublemakers. But this bill is more than about those who commit war against the state. Ultimately, this bill leads to granting the government the right to strip citizenship from any dual citizens who are convicted of terrorism. To this point, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the worldwide leader of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jama'at, spoke this past summer even before the motioning of this bill. He says, and I quote, "Indeed, for the entire world to become Canada, we must keep a vigilant eye on all forms of extremism and extremists." And in so doing, His Holiness recognized, even led the way, in informing Canadians about the need to protect from the threat of extremism. But why should we only worry about such problems after the fact? Extremism must be rooted out before it even festers in the first place. It should never happen to begin with. Regarding this, His Holiness advised the government in the same address with the following words. He says, and again I quote, "I would like to draw your attention towards one matter in particular. The government should be aware that it is quite possible for certain extremist elements to enter the country on the pretext of benefiting from the various investment opportunities or schemes of the government. This risk should be kept in view by the policymakers when determining future immigration and investment policies." He goes on to say, "No doubt the eyes and glances of those who hold extremist ideologies are cast upon this country. It is not necessary that they will conduct a large-scale terrorist attack, but instead they may take a more subtle approach, whereby they will seek to gradually spread their hate-filled ideologies upon entering the country. Certainly, one common and relatively easy way of entering the country is on the pretext of business, trade, and investment. Now, it could be argued that the various changes to the immigration processes have made immigration to Canada more difficult, and it would appear odd that an ethnic and religious community would support such changes and possibly more in the future. However, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is utterly against all forms of terrorism and extremism and supports any policy that protects the principle of loyalty to Canada wholeheartedly. We realize that it would perhaps make immigration applications more stringent for acceptance to Canada for members of our community and others. However, Canada must protect the reputation and the generosity that this great country affords to those that get to call it their home. Our utmost priority is the safety and progress of Canada, even if it means that members of our own community find it difficult to immigrate here. In closing, I return to the proposed Bill C-425 and end this endorsement to protect the sanctity of Canadian citizenship with some humble words of caution. I can tell you that more than anything, along with our values of tolerance and plurality, Canada is defined by its qualities of justice, fairness, and due process. So in empowering the state to strip citizenship from dual citizens who commit acts of war and potentially acts of terror against Canada, the Government of Canada must ensure that individuals are not even accused, let alone convicted of such acts lightly. The bill and its accompanying rules should be carefully drafted. It would be tragic and not to the intent of the bill if an innocent citizen was to suffer due to a hurried decision or an improper investigation. How these measures are set up, I leave to the able-minded policymakers of our government. Our final advice would be that due process, full investigation, and the highest standards of fairness, care, and consideration are exhibited in exercising a power that allows for the removal of this most precious and sacred gift we call citizenship. So long live Canada, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Khan. We thank you for your kind words of Canada. We certainly appreciate your remarks. Our second witness is Professor Scoppio, Associate Professor at the Royal Military College. Good morning to you, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Okay, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an associate professor at the Canadian Defence Academy and the Royal Military College. I've been asked to appear as an individual based on my expertise, and I will be speaking on my behalf and not on behalf of the Department of National Defence. I've conducted research in Canada and elsewhere on immigrant integration and organizational diversity, including military organizations and the Canadian Forces. I will focus my comments on the first part of Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act, specifically on the subsection which refers to reducing by 1 year the required years of residence in Canada of any permanent resident who is a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, has signed a minimum 3-year contract, and completed basic training. The intended outcome of the above-mentioned amendment is somewhat unclear. If the intent is simply to expedite the citizenship process of a few select immigrants who happen to have unique skills to fulfill a special need of the Canadian Forces, then the bill, if passed, would be accomplishing this outcome and result in a small-scale impact. If, however, the intent is to open the door of the Canadian Forces to greater numbers of qualified landed immigrants with permanent residence in order to provide, and I quote, new Canadians with more pathways to integration, as stated by Mr. Shorey, who presented the bill when he appeared before this committee, then the bill on its own would not accomplish this broader outcome. This proposed amendment to the Citizenship Act will likely impact a very small number of individuals, since the #1 advertised requirement to join the Canadian Forces is Canadian citizenship. Only occasionally the Canadian Forces recruit non-citizens. As the committee learned in a previous hearing, only about 60 personnel in the Canadian Forces are non-Canadian citizens with permanent residency status, or about 15 on average yearly. Roughly, this will represent less than 0.5% of the Canadian Forces' yearly planned intake. The policy that establishes Canadian Forces enrollment requirements is found in the Queen's Regulations and Orders, QRNO, Chapter 6, which states that in order to be eligible for enrollment in the Canadian Forces as an officer or non-commissioned member, a person must be a Canadian citizen, except that the Chief of the Defence Staff or such officer as he may designate may authorize the enrollment of a citizen of another country if he is satisfied that a special need exists and that the national interest would not be prejudiced thereby. As illustrated, there are exceptions to the citizenship requirement to join the Canadian Forces. However, these exceptions are few and not widely advertised. As well, it should be noted that there are additional challenges and significant delays to obtain security clearance for any applicant, whether he or she is a Canadian citizen or foreign national, who has resided abroad. I was one of them, so I know. For the great majority of the Canadian Forces occupations, the required security level is Level 2 secret. Therefore, should the actual intent be to open the Canadian Forces recruiting door, to qualified immigrant men and women who are permanent residents, the bill on its own would not accomplish this outcome. Rather, relevant policies would have to be amended to allow more newcomers to apply and join the Canadian Forces. These potential policy changes will likely result in increasing the diversity of the Canadian Forces membership, since currently the Canadian Forces do not reflect the cultural, ethnic, and gender diversity of the Canadian society. At the same time, it would be important to consider interrelated issues such as security clearance that I spoke about, official language ability, and foreign credentials, just to name a few. As well, it would be informative to review the policies and processes in place in other militaries that recruit non-citizens, such as the United States of America and more recently Australia. In conclusion, I am in favor to the subsection of the bill regarding expediting citizenship requirements of permanent residents who are members of the Canadian Armed Forces. This would be a positive step. However, as it stands, the impact of this amendment to the Citizenship Act on new immigrants would not be significant, as they are, by and large, not eligible to join the Canadian Forces. If a wider impact is envisioned, other relevant policies would have to be amended accordingly to allow greater numbers of qualified future Canadian citizens to join the Canadian Forces, thus providing them with more pathways to integration. Thank you for this opportunity to provide my perspective.
And thank you, Professor Scoppio. We appreciate your comments. Our final witness is from the Muslim Canadian Congress, Ms. Siddiqui. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here today to speak to you not only as President of Muslim Canadian Congress, but more importantly as a proud Canadian. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague Tahir Gora, who serves as the Secretary General of the Muslim Canadian Congress, right next to me. Canadians are known around the world as being honest, polite, fair, and as brokers of peace. We wear the maple leaf proudly on our backpacks while traveling, and we heard stories of others sewing the flag on theirs in order to enjoy the same benefits. The benefits that come with being a Canadian. Our global reputation is a great source of pride for all Canadians, but it also comes with great responsibility. I came to this country in 1967, many years ago, from Pakistan. My country of birth was experiencing much hardship. My parents, like any other parents, wanted the best for their children. They brought us to safety and security in this country. What happened next is what makes Canada so great. My experience is the embodiment of immigrant experience. Nothing came easy to us. We worked, and worked very hard. With that hard work, doors opened, opportunities came, and it is with great pride that I'm happy to say that we successfully built businesses here. And the same experience for my colleague, Tahir Gora. I know countless others from all the world who have shared the immigrant experience in Canada. We all know too well that in this increasingly globalized, competitive world, we will continue to need immigrants from all stripes to spur our economy, to foster innovation, and to contribute as many countless millions before them in building a strong and more prosperous Canada. Canada's stellar reputation is one in which we can recruit the world's best and brightest. It is for this reason that I am here today. Ladies and gentlemen, our reputation is under attack. Some Canadians who use their very citizenship and passport that come with it to engage in activities that are nothing short of absolutely contradictory to our Canadian values. We have heard stories of Canadians being involved in terrorist activities in different hotspots throughout the world. Some have killed, others have trained or are training with known terrorist groups, and they continue to plot attacks against our interests and those of our allies. Indeed, it is an affront to our men and women in uniform who serve to protect Canadian values around the world that they should have to confront violence perpetuated by opportunistic and disloyal Canadians. Those of us who lived through the 1980s remember well the damage done to Canada's reputation by act of Sikh terrorism. Recent news about Canadian citizens involved in terrorist act in Algeria, Bulgaria, and with Al-Shabaab in Somalia should disturb us all. The flow of young Canadians to terrorist training camps around the world is indeed a matter of concern. We cannot allow this to continue. Canadians who are opposed to the values of our society should not be allowed to abuse the privileges that come with holding Canadian citizenship. We must act to strip Canadian citizenship from those that seek to exploit it for violent and illegal activities. Bill C-425 seeks to strip Canadian citizenship from dual nationals engaged in violent disloyalty to Canada. The Muslim Canadians supports this bill. We remember all too well how frustrating it was for us to be painted by some in the U.S. media as a safe haven for terrorists, as a place where terrorists could come and exploit the very judicial system they seek to destroy for their own means. It is for this reason why we must support this legislation and demonstrate that no one shall be permitted to spill blood under our name. I've heard concerns that Bill C-425 represent a knee-jerk reaction, or that it serves, quote, political process. I disagree. Bill C-425 represents an assertion of pride we hold in our values of an open liberal democracy where our freedoms are applied to all. Ladies and gentlemen, we must be reasonable. We cannot allow those with violent aspiration who seek to attack us, our interests, and those of our allies to do so while using our flag under the banner which provides them the freedom and mobility to participate in these violent, hateful, and cowardly acts. In closing, I would like to thank you for this opportunity and would ask that you support the passage of Bill C-425. It is an essential step in all of us taking a stand in guard for thee. Thank you very much.
And thank you to all of you for your presentations and comments. They've been very helpful. Members of the committee will now have a series of questions and comments to make to you. On this side is the members of the opposition. On this side is the government. So our first question is from Ms. James.